What's going on? Welcome in to another members only live stream here on Pure Potential. I just pulling up the chat here. Looks like we've got a couple of viewers. Hopefully we can grab a few more. How you guys doing tonight? Let's see here. All right. It's slightly ironic that I have the overlay up here that says become a member for exclusive perks, because I already have all the exclusive perks, but happy to have you here. Meyer, if that's the right pronunciation. I'm feeling a lot better, so thank you. Appreciate it. I was under the weather until middle of the day yesterday, roughly, and definitely feeling a lot better today. The voice is still coming back. I don't know. I didn't really lose my voice while I was sick. It just was uncomfortable to talk. And then going back to school and being congested and teaching all day and talking to kids and yelling at kids, I lost my voice a little bit. But yeah, no, it's good. It's good to be back on the air here and talk a little Dynasty. I noticed I was out this evening before going live, and there's a couple questions that have stacked up in the chat, so probably just going to answer these on stream here. Maybe let's just tag people here, just let you guys know. At 808 and Mad Eye. Let's just let you guys know. All right. HM, what's going on? Good evening. Welcome to the stream. I want to talk a little bit about, well, I'll go over these questions real quick. I can probably knock these out. Tim had asked a question as well. He was the only one who followed the assignment and asked me a question earlier when I made the announcement. So I'm going to answer his question. And then I thought it would be kind of interesting to go back to my preseason takeaways. And now that the season's kind of played out, talk a little bit about which ones of those went right and which ones went very wrong, and maybe see if there's anything to take away from that, or where the process went wrong, or, would I do it all again? That kind of thing. But you guys, as always, feel free to jump in, whatever's on your mind, interrupt me, hit me up with questions, whatever you're thinking. As far as I'm concerned, people that are watching live are my top priority, so happy to have you guys here. Tim's question, two questions. First one was, how do you prefer handling late first round draft capital? So selling for players, holding, selling for future firsts. And then the second question was, do you believe there's any benefit to selling later picks before there is a set in stone draft order attached? So I'm going to answer the second part first. Selling later, so later first, I think, is what he means, not like third or fourths. Later firsts before draft order is attached. I think that is kind of just a risk reward thing. I think in most classes, the late firsts don't become less valuable after the NFL draft. I think it has happened. The only time I can think of since I've started playing Dynasty that's the case would have been the Devon Achane, Zach Charbonnet year, which I guess was last year, 2023, where a bunch of guys just didn't really get the draft capital we wanted. And so I think that late first was it was Zach Charbonnet, it was Devon Achane, it was, who was it that year? It wasn't the Kenny Pickett year. That's the Bryce Young class. It was Bijan. So it was Bijan and Gibbs and JSN. Do I have that right? Yeah, it was QJ. Yeah, it was QJ, Zay Flowers, Jordan Addison, Devon Achane, Zach Charbonnet. I'm sure there was someone else in there that I'm missing. But that was the only year I can really think of where the late first was viewed with such contempt. Other years we've had George Pickens, T. Higgins, Devonta Smith, Chris Olave, Justin Herbert, really good players. And then this past year, obviously, Bo Nix, Lad McConkey, Brian Thomas, guys that had high draft capital, guys that had sought after landing spots. I think for the most part, you're not really I don't think you're risking anything in terms of market value by holding on to those picks. The question of whether you should actually make the picks or if you should trade them away, that's going to depend on the player evaluation. But I don't think that you're benefiting by selling those later picks before draft orders attached in the sense that you are like locking in value that could be lost later. I think most of the time that value is locked in regardless, because there's going to be some player that people talk themselves into belonging in that spot. His other question was, how do you prefer handling late round draft capital? Yeah. So, another question that is really case by case. I think it probably, number one, depends on my team, and it depends on like my team value, right? So if I have a late first and I have kind of a lower value team and I have the potential to turn that into a future first, 2026 first, maybe, that, especially one that has a little bit of variance to it that could potentially be earlier, that would be a good time to maybe sell that for a future first. Theo, what's up? Welcome to the live. I don't remember if this is your first live or not, but appreciate you stopping in. Yella, I see you've got the blue icon here for 3 months. Nice. HM has the purple ones. Is the blue one for 3 months, or is that, no, that's the 1 month icon. So I guess you got a special thing. You've got some kind of like special icon under your name. Let me get rid of the overlay here so I can see it. Potential league winners. It's cut off. I guess it says 3 months. That's pretty cool, man. That is pretty cool. I appreciate you. Yeah. So what do I do with late round draft capital? Let me try to think back to this past class, because I do remember making selections with these picks. I do remember trading in for some of these picks at times to get Lad McConkey, to get Bo Nix, or whoever I could get. Yeah, I don't know if I have like an exact prescription. I feel like that's part of what I love about Dynasty and maybe specifically rookie classes is like each one is so unique, where there's always some angle that I think you can exploit in the market, but it's not always the same angle. And so, I don't know if there's a prescription for late round capital all the time. If there's a certain subset of players that I feel like is being supremely undervalued that you can go out and get for late first, then I'm going to be out there saying, yeah, go trade your late first for, Rashee Rice or whatever, if you can do that. But if there's not that, and it's actually the cases that the market is undervaluing these late first players because they didn't get the landing spots we wanted, but the profiles are strong, or they got such good landing spots for year one that they're actually going to gain value anyway. Like, it's going to come down to the class. And so I think this year will be interesting. Still haven't really dived into the rookies too much. That's going to come once the regular fantasy season is over. But it does feel like a class where it could become very flat in that range, where potentially the goal is maybe, you don't want to be sitting at 110, 111, but maybe you actually want to be at, 204, 205, because you're going to have this flat tier. I don't know for sure, because we don't know how the draft capital is going to shake out, but it seems like it could be one of those classes where it's all about maneuvering to the beginning of the tiers, or to the end of the tiers, and getting those guys that fall to you, that kind of thing. HM, this is a trick question. I don't have any Jaden Reed on my rosters because that dude's been overvalued for 2 months. I don't have any Jaden Reed. If I did, the answer would be definitely not to sell right now, because he's definitely better than he's been the last month, putting up 25 yards or less every single game. Like that, he's a good wide receiver, like undoubtedly a good wide receiver. I don't know exactly what's going on right now. I think that part of the problem is just game scripts. you know, I don't watch every Packers game all the way through, just full transparency, but like I watched last night's game all the way through, and they were running a lot of 2 tight end and 2 running back sets, which meant that Jayden Reed just wasn't on the field for those snaps because he doesn't play outside of 11 personnel. So when they're running 12 or they're running, what is it called when there's 2 running backs? Oh my gosh, 21 personnel. It's hard for him to get enough snaps even to earn those targets. And so that's one of the big problems is like, we can think he's as talented as we want to think, but the Packers have him pigeonholed as a specialty player. He plays in 11. It doesn't mean he always plays in the slot either. But if they only have 2 wide receivers on the field, it's Watson and Dobbs, or it's Watson and Wicks. It's just one of those things. I don't know if it's a blocking problem that they don't trust him to block, but right now he's not on the field. He's more than halfway through his second year in the league. I think it's kind of unfair to just assume that he's going to become more than that while he's on the Packers. So I think he was just overvalued on touchdowns. He was overvalued on big playability. And I don't think we can really rely on him to change much from what he currently is. That's just my take on it. So I think he's kind of a late first type of player. And full transparency, like I did have him ranked as a base first at one point. I maybe even had him a little bit higher when he was on his hot streak. I felt a little pressured into it. I put out a tweet that was like, I don't know, how can we have faith in this guy when his target shares really aren't there, his snap share's not really there. And one person in particular, Jacob Sanderson, who I really admire his thought process, he was very high on Reed, and I definitely felt like sort of pushed in that way, where I was like, look, maybe this is just a ball knower thing. He's just good. In the end, the snap shares, the target shares, they didn't lie to us. And the truth is, while he is exciting and has big plays and stuff, he's not going to be that consistent, like wide receiver 1 type of guy. Austin, I love that you're asking for this because I love best ball, and I absolutely I'm happy to do best ball drafts on here. I think I've probably got enough prep for tonight outside of just random questions that I probably won't get into one tonight. Also, there's not really any contests that I want to be drafting right now. I maxed out the one of the playoff best ball contests that I was doing, and then I'm trying to save my entries in the little gauntlet, which is the other one I want to max enter. I want to wait until after this week's games because I want a little clearer picture of the playoff landscape, which teams are going to get bye weeks, that kind of thing. So maybe next week I can do a couple of those. That would be pretty fun, actually. Theo says Reed is an awesome player, not being used to his potential. Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. Matt Harmon definitely is high on him as a star talent. He's also been high on guys like Rashad Bateman, and that's not to say Matt Harmon is wrong. It's just that sometimes what he's prioritizing or what he's seeing on film doesn't translate to how these players are being utilized. And so that's where the fantasy takes come in, where we have to say, like, where do the ball nowhere takes end, and where do we have to, like, where does the rubber hit the road as far as fantasy production and utilization and stuff like that. So I don't think Matt's wrong. I mean, I think Jayden Reed does some stuff really, really well. I've seen him make incredible plays. But that being said, we can only buy into that side of it to such a degree. And at this point, he's been an active hindrance to your goals in fantasy for about a month. Yella says, I've got a team of all quarterbacks: Caleb, May, Daniels, McCarthy, Bryce, JJ, only Puka, Neighbors. What is JJ? Then JJ, only Puka, Neighbors. I'm not following what that means. Are we selling Bryce for any first? Yes, I'm selling Bryce Young for any first. Absolutely. Yeah. I'm stealing this directly from Dynasty Points, but I think it's exactly the type of case that I would make, is just, what do you win if you win with Bryce Young? Basically, his upside case is to be like Tua, maybe Purdy as an absolute ceiling. And it's like, those are still guys that are going like 3rd round in startups. It's like, to sell Bryce Young for a first, it's like you're locking in such a base level of value, and what you're potentially missing out on if everything hits perfectly is like maybe a second first at best. Like, he's never going to be worth more than 2 firsts. So it's just, I think it's just a risk reward thing where, like, especially on a team like that where you have absolutely no need for him, it just makes too much sense to just cash out, in my opinion. All right. What do you need on top of Rashee Rice to send the 103? You guys are coming at me with the questions. I asked for questions like, what was it, like 5 hours ago? Oh, no, it was yesterday. For questions yesterday, nobody had any questions. Now you guys got all the questions in the world. What do you need on top of Rashee Rice to send off the 103? Well, let's just look at the old rankings here. Not that I have rookie picks in the rankings, but just let me get myself reoriented here where I have Rice. Well, right about 1.25 base firsts. I would think of the 103. It's hard to say right now because it feels like McMillan and Janty are kind of locked in at those top 2 spots, but a lot can change, right? If we get somebody like a Shedeur Sanders, top 5 draft capital or something, he's gonna slide into that 33 spot probably. What do you need on top of Rashee Rice on the 1-3? When you're talking about the flexibility of that pick versus Rice, who I love. I mean, I love Rice, the player. The food I'm pretty so on. He's probably, he's going to have that suspension. That's going to be another hit to his value, or at the very least, it's going to make him a less flexible asset. I would probably at this point in time want like an early second, maybe. I'd push for like an early second on top if I could get it. I might settle for a mid second. I might settle for like 2 random seconds on top. But I think you can be kind of greedy when you have a really early first. So that's probably where I would sit. Let me hit a couple more of these from the member chat and then get into my topics for today. Earlier, Yella asked, Tank Dell plus DK plus what is what we would sell Puka for? I kind of agree with what Mad-Eye MD said, which is probably about a base first, but probably not doing the deal. Yeah, I'm pretty much in the same boat. I'm not really thrilled about the concept of the trade, so probably just not something I would really entertain. I think that the answer in terms of what would create equivalent value overall would be about a base first, but I would still want the Puka side there. And then you also asked, are you sending Henry plus 105 or 106 for Breece Hall? Oh, Breece Hall is driving me insane. On one hand, we have a guy who's going to be 24 for all of next season, so still a very young player. He has all of the skills that you could possibly want in a running back. He can succeed at the goal line. He can command a high target share. He can create explosive plays in any facet of the game. On the other hand, the Jets are an absolute dumpster fire of an organization. There's going to be coaching uncertainty. There's going to be quarterback uncertainty. We just don't know how they're going to utilize these running backs. And I think what we've kind of been seeing this year is that running backs talent is not all that matters. Derrick Henry is just as talented this year as he was last year, and he's far more successful this year than last year because he is on a team that can maximize those talents. Same thing goes for Josh Jacobs. Same thing goes for Saquon Barkley. Same thing goes for Joe Mixon, even, who was on a good offense last year, but he was not having the level of success that he's having on the Texans because largely, from what I understand, the Texans are running much more of this zone run scheme that is more fitted to his skill set. So even though the Bengals were the team that drafted him and signed him and kept him around for a long time, they were not unlocking his potential. So I don't know. I don't know what Breece Hall's situation looks like next year. That is a little scary to me when you're talking about such an early pick. But I do have him ranked top 30 asset overall. I do think Derrick Henry is absolutely not worth a first even now. He's certainly not worth a first in the offseason. He's probably worth at best an early second. So it's a mid first and an early second for Breece Hall. I still think that that's a fair price to pay. I don't think you have to do it because I think most trades that you can get done with rookie picks right now can pretty much get done later. But but I do think that that's like a reasonable trade you can make. I think it's fine. So that was kind of long-winded. As a contender with Neighbors injury concern, how much more than a playoff first are we willing to add to get Jefferson? I'm not doing that. 808 Desert, if you are in the audience, don't do that. I have Jefferson and Neighbors in the same tier, and Justin Jefferson's not even scoring that much. I mean, I don't think that he's in, like, I'm not worried about Justin Jefferson, to be clear, but it's not like he's the obvious answer to your contender woes. Like, I would much sooner go out and trade 2 seconds for Jerry Jeudy than I would add a first to Malik Neighbors to get Jefferson. I see them as pretty equivalent. I still prefer Jefferson, but I do not have them more than like a second round pick apart. So I don't think that's necessary. I think you hold your first. I think if you need to get a different player, you go make a pivot. But did I miss something? Is Malik Neighbors going to miss a game? Because I haven't heard that he's going to miss any time. And that would be pretty bad for me if he was. So don't mind me, just doing a quick little search here. If anybody knows anything definitive about Malik Neighbors, feel free to let me know. Oh, brother. Status is very murky on Malik Neighbors. George Pickens. Kenneth Walker. What is going on? What is all this? I mean, I don't have any George Pickens, but what the heck is this? Kenneth Walker is iffy now? Ugh, this is shaping up to be a nightmare. Yeah. I just hope this isn't one of those like phantom injuries where they're going to shut him down for the rest of the season. That would be really annoying. Okay, well, either way, I don't think that the answer for me would be trading him with a plus on top to get a different. I would try to go and get a Jerry Jeudy, Cortland Sutton, Jacoby Myers type of wide receiver and just ride it out with that guy. Because honestly, what Jefferson has been providing over the last month or even longer isn't really a step above that. And I just don't think it's worth trading a first there. Hope he plays. All right. I think that was all the questions that were in the chat. I answered Tim's question. So let me jump into this. I had 8 preseason takeaways that I put in a video right before the season kicked off. And I just thought it would be kind of funny to go back through and talk about those. I think I did well enough. Like I'm comfortable with how it turned out looking back on it. The idea was just to look at some of the usage trends, some of the narratives, some of the coach speak from preseason, see if we could apply it to some dynasty takes. The first one was to stash Jordan Mason. That was a huge win. Stashing Jordan Mason in dynasty definitely yielded dividends for people, whether they used him in their lineups for a few weeks, got some running back one production, whether they traded him away at the peak of his value for, early second or whatever. Stashing Jordan Mason was definitely a big win. Now I certainly wasn't first on the scene there. Like there were definitely people already talking about Jordan Mason as the guy you need, and he wasn't available in every league when I was talking like that. But I was able to pick him up at least in one league in August, and that ended up becoming the infamous Jordan Mason for Josh Downs trade that I was dogged for on Twitter. Kind of crazy how that one turned out, but anyway, taking that one as a win. It's a shame that people who picked him up aren't able to enjoy this end of season run from him, but can't knock the process, that's for sure. The second one was avoiding Cole Kmet and Pat Freiermuth. Their usage in the preseason wasn't promising. They weren't running all the routes. They were being, in kind of platoons with these other tight ends, and their offenses already were either crowded or like not projected to be particularly pass friendly. I'm pretty comfortable with this as a win. I think overall in the season, Cole Kmet has been better than I thought, but I went and looked at his game log. He's had a total of 3 top 12 weeks. It's just that 2 of them were like ridiculous spike weeks where he scored like 24 points. So I would say in best ball, he was a pretty fine pick. The problem is you would have stacked him up with Bears players, which haven't been very good this year. But as a managed asset, I mean, he's still pretty much been a nightmare where like most weeks he's just a nothing. And then Pat Freiermuth, he's had 8.8 points per game this year, tight end 16 on the season, pretty unimpactful, like not really distancing from the field. So I would say as dynasty assets, both of them were a little overpriced coming into the year. And if you faded those guys, you're probably not really regretting it, unless of course you traded them for Luke Musgrave, which was a guy that I did have some interest in. So my bad. Had the wrong Packers tight end there. My next take was a pretty firm loss. I was talking about avoiding Kyren Williams in Dynasty at his cost. That definitely didn't pan out. That was at the peak of like Blake Corum mania, where people were like, he's going to have a 50-50 timeshare. And I just kind of thought there was enough of a drumbeat that there was going to be something, right? There was going to be some role for Blake Corum, and Kyren is very much a volume dependent running back. Where I got it wrong was that he just keeps getting the volume. He keeps getting it anyway. Clearly, Sean McVay has a deep commitment to Kyren Williams, or Kyren Williams has some kind of blackmail on his family or something. I don't know. But either way, he's been a smash in fantasy once again. Now, I did say in the video, I showed a bunch of running backs that I would prefer in Dynasty. 3 of those running backs were Isaiah Pacheco, James Cook, and Travis Etienne. So those are a big whoops. I did also say Kenneth Walker and Saquon Barkley. Those guys would have been big wins, in my opinion, or at least in Walker's case, at least a small win. I think he's the more valuable back. Barkley would have been a big win. So some silver lining there, but obviously if you moved Etienne for Pacheco or Travis Etienne, you're not happy about that. And then I had another pretty bad running back take. But I don't feel too bad because I kind of took this L with a lot of people in my neck of the woods, which was trying to stock up on those Denver running backs. Just did not pan out. I was specifically pretty hyped about the Samaje Perine departure. That was opening up the backfield to be Javonte or Estime or McLaughlin. And it did open it up, but it turns out Javonte Williams is completely cooked. The dude can't play. So he wasn't able to step up and take on the large role that I think maybe the team wanted him to. And because of that, the team just continues to shuffle running backs rotation, shuffle the rotation. They don't consolidate around anybody. 1 week, Javonte gets 10 carries, and then he gets 2 carries. And Estime will get 13, and then he gets 2. And then some weeks, McLaughlin will go off, and some weeks he doesn't do anything. It's very strange. Overall, the backfield does rank 16th in rushing fantasy points, so it's kind of like middle of the pack backfield. And it's probably even higher than that if you were able to check expected points. I was just looking at the data suite. They don't have expected points for the whole backfield, but it's probably higher just given how bad their running backs have been. They're probably underperforming their usage. So it could have been a pretty lucrative backfield if one running back could consolidate. The problem is no running backs consolidated. So none of them have been very good investments. None of them were super expensive investments in Dynasty. But nonetheless, that's a negative take there. My next one here was on Kenneth Walker, that he actually does have upside. And I would take that one as a win. I had been a Kenneth Walker hater for a couple of years. I was very down on him as a prospect because he didn't catch the ball. Didn't catch the ball in the first 2 years of the NFL either. This year, I decided to buy into some coach speak. New coaching staff came in. All they talked about was, wow, this guy can catch the ball. We want to get him the ball. He sat out the whole preseason. And he did end up, he's currently a top 10 running back in points per game. So that's been huge. I think even that undersells a little bit of what he was doing this year because he has had some like super inefficient games that I think are more about the Seahawks getting absolutely bodied by opponents and having to stop running, or their line just not being able to sustain blocks. Like every time Kenneth Walker pops up on my screen on Red Zone, he's getting stuffed at the 1 yard line, I feel like. So I do put a little bit of that on the line. But yeah, he's been good. He's been a big breakout candidate or big breakout running back this year. And then probably my overall like biggest bad take that has had the most like overall repercussions for the year is picking the Jaguars as kind of like the breakout offense of the year. So this is just one where you kind of look back and you're just like, how did I get here? But I had thought that the Jaguars were primed to be, you know, the de facto breakout, kind of the Texans, I guess you could say, of this year. Trevor finally puts it all together. He's got new weapon in Brian Thomas Jr. They've got the role players they need in Kirk and Ingram and Gabe Davis, and they've got ETN in the backfield, and it's going to be, you know, fireworks. I would say the biggest problem here starts at the top. It starts with the scheme. The scheme has been broken since Peterson and Press Taylor have come to town. It's never looked like the offense has never looked creative or innovative or anything. It makes everything as hard as possible for Trevor Lawrence. That hasn't changed. And I think that was maybe the big mistake, is just thinking that the pieces were going to become more than a sum of their parts when the scheme wasn't there. You know, I'm still a believer in Trevor Lawrence's talent. I get where people come from when they're more skeptical. I think if you plopped him into Minnesota, you plopped him into San Francisco, I think it would be absolute fireworks. I just think that this system doesn't work. And Kirk and Ingram getting injured certainly didn't help. ETN getting injured didn't help. The line play has been bad, certainly below average, bottom half of the league, easily. So there's a lot here. But either way, it was not the correct call. And so steering people to invest in pieces of the offense, I would say outside of Brian Thomas Jr., has definitely not panned out. Now, I did specifically say Brian Thomas was the guy that I was most excited to invest in. That has been a win in Dynasty for sure. That is definitely a good thing to have Brian Thomas from where he was drafted in rookie drafts till now. I mean, it is a clear upward trajectory. And I think he is even maybe still undervalued just because his environment's been so bad. But I think he has uber upside for the future. I would say probably the kind of guy that's going at like the 2-3 turn in redraft next year, maybe even mid-second potentially. So yeah, very, very high ceiling for him. My last two takes are smash wins. So just maybe victory lap time, but Nico Collins as the clear wide receiver 1 for the Texans. So that was based on his increased route participation in the preseason and his per route efficiency from 2023. And so the thought was, look, this guy was awesome last year. He didn't run all the routes. So if he can up his route participation and maintain anything close to this efficiency, he's going to explode. And so that was a take I really didn't come around on until late in the offseason, but I started to come around on it and seeing Nico Collins as like a top 5 wide receiver. I think that was actually what was on the thumbnail. Nico Collins, and it said top 5. And he is the wide receiver 3 in points per game. So that's been huge for sure. And he's definitely one of those guys that you would, you know, love to go back and get, even at his offseason price, which was a massive increase from his previous offseason price. It was still not enough of a price boost. So he's been a good investment. I'm glad that I was able to get on that train at the last minute. I think I bought him in a couple leagues like right before week 1. I know one league I traded Tank Dell in a second. So that feels pretty good. All right. The last take from that video, preseason takeaways, was that Brock Bowers is already the dynasty tight end 1. I tried to save my hottest take for last, and that doesn't seem like a hot take now. I would say in the NFL preseason, that was a pretty hot take, and I'm pretty happy about how that one has played out. He played 11 of 14 snaps in the Raiders' first drive of their first preseason game. He lined up at tight end, he lined up at fullback, he lined up in the slot, he lined up out wide. And that was pretty much enough for me to say, okay, well, I already know Brock Bowers rocks. I know he's amazing. And based on that utilization, the Raiders clearly know he's amazing. And so that was pretty much it. That was pretty much all that was required for me, you know, to make that decision. And so it didn't take too long. Now he's clearly valued that way as the tight end 1. And so it definitely feels good to get one right there. I wish I bought him in more leagues. I tried. It was very difficult to pry him away from people, but either way, hopefully that video got more people to go out and get him, more pure potential viewers specifically, and hopefully they're thriving because of it. So yeah, I mean, if you guys remember any of those takes, I don't know if any of them stuck out to you at the time, or if you were even a viewer then, but yeah, I'm pretty happy with how that one came out. Probably something I'll try to replicate in the future is just putting together those last minute takes before the season, even if it's just something to look back on later. It is nice to have a little bit of that accountability, come back to it and say, okay, what was the process here? Why did I get this wrong? Could I have avoided getting this wrong? I think with some of these, something like Kyren Williams, it's hard to say whether there's a lesson there or whether it's just I was hedging on an outcome, and it was certainly possible that Blake Corum got more involved and kind of nuked his value. And just because that didn't happen doesn't mean it was wrong to sort of hedge my bets and go with other running backs that I thought were safer. I don't know, and I don't say that because I'm afraid to take an L or anything. I don't want to learn the wrong lessons, which is something I want to make a video about after this season or late this season. Is like, I think it's very easy to get the wrong takeaways from something, especially an isolated one-time incident, and then try to apply that forward and then always apply that to every case. Like, I'm seeing people writing off Bucky Irving as the next James Robinson, when in reality there's like almost no similarities between Bucky Irving and James Robinson. And so I think learning the wrong lessons can sometimes be more of a problem for people than just not learning anything. And I don't want to learn the wrong lessons. So I don't feel too terribly bad about avoiding Kyren Williams. I think, investing in those other running backs for the most part, I think was fine to do. I do feel like the Jaguars thing was maybe a little bit fragile. And the Denver running backs thing, that's just arguing about whether, a lack of talent was a concern or if the price was so low that it didn't matter. I don't know. I'm not so sure there, but I'm fine with it either way. So, yeah, those are pretty much my takes. That's what I got for tonight. Haven't seen any chats in a little while. It says there's 9 of you out there, so if you're alive, let me know. But if you guys have any other questions before I shut this thing down, I'm all ears. I know there's not that much going on. Like, we're just sort of staying the course, trying to make our playoffs and just sort of see what happens, Hunto dropping the random W in the chat. W's all around, I guess. Big dub. We are listening. Hey, I appreciate it. I appreciate you guys listening. Sometimes when I don't see a chat message for a while, I just get paranoid that my plugin that feeds the chat into my streaming service is broken, and there's like a million messages that I haven't read. So that's usually why I just ask for a little, just a proof of life. But yeah, only other news for me is I got a new chair. I made a new chair. Fun fact, I've been switching chairs because normally the chair that I sit in to do my work is too low. And so I'm like down here on the camera. And then my wife has a chair, which is very uncomfortable in my opinion, but is taller. So whenever I do my recordings, I would have to wheel her chair around my desk and move my chair out of the way, record in that chair, and then switch it back. And I decided that enough is enough, that I'm a professional YouTuber now, and I'm going to get a chair that is both comfortable and tall enough. So I did it, and I built it today. And this is my very first stream in the new chair. I don't actually know how I should say your username. Hits Q. I don't know. I'm not going to even try. Very excited for your off-season strategy rookie videos. Hey, I'm excited too. I'm excited that you're excited. Ian, I think at this point you can safely do that. I think you can pivot off of Rome for JSN. I think he's proven enough. He's a safe enough investment. Even if we can quibble about whether the high end ceiling is going to be there for him consistently, whether he's actually going to be a guy that can flirt with top 5 production or whatever, he's at least established himself as one of those safer wide receivers. You know, at least he's a Devonta Smith. He's at least a Zay Flowers or whatever. That is safe enough for me to just say, yeah, I'm going to pivot off of Rome, who, like, frankly has been pretty concerning so far. He's not a guy I'm panicking on per se. Like, I'm not getting out of my way to get rid of him. I think there's a lot of excuses that can be made for him that are valid. But just like in general, you know, if we don't see some signs of life from him in the next few weeks, his value is going to be lower in the offseason, and people are going to have to, like, talk themselves back into him. So, oh, hold on. I think Pacheco will be good going into next season. I'm sure you probably mentioned it. No, I mean, I really haven't talked about Pacheco. I think it's really one of those things where, like, I think it's going to depend on how he finishes the season. People are going to have different levels of confidence. Right now, I can't really say whether the Chiefs are going to go out and get another running back or not, because he's going to be entering into the last year of his contract as a 7th round rookie. And so if they don't, like, sign him to an extension in the offseason before we get to the draft, with how strong of a class it is, I think you have to at least be a little bit worried that they would add another body. But I don't have, like, any definitive evidence, like, one way or the other that they would or they wouldn't add another running back. So I think he's a great asset, like, in the role that he currently has. I'm not sure how jazzed I would be about him, like, in a committee. So I think he's probably worth about an early second. I think he'll continue to be worth about an early second unless he goes on some absolute tear in the playoffs, in which case he might be a good sell candidate. F. Brees Hall, says Theo. You know, I want to agree with you, but at the same time, when we start to feel this way is probably when players we know are extremely talented become buys, right? Like, if we start to simply despise great players because they're so frustrating, other people are probably frustrated, and we should probably put our emotions aside and go out and just trade for those players. Nicholas, I don't think I've seen you in here asking questions before, so welcome into the member stream. Thoughts about Justin Fields' future? If I had to guess, I would say it's unlikely that he enters the season as an intentional starter, but I think it's not implausible that he finds himself on a depth chart with, like, another shaky quarterback that he's in a camp battle with, or that he ends up playing for at some point in the future. I struggle to put much stock into him beyond maybe, like, a late second at best. But he's an interesting guy to stash just because he does have that upside when he's on the field. Theo, I don't really read the Dynasty Market Report. Really the only fantasy points content that I follow would be, I listen to the Dynasty Points podcast with Tom and Jacob Sanderson and Ryan Heath. I like to read Ryan's articles, and I like to read, when I can, Scott Barrett's stuff, but otherwise I don't follow along too much with the rest. HM, how are you feeling about the likelihood of JJ McCarthy starting next year? 100%. He's starting next year. I've literally no doubt in my mind that he's starting. They're not going to re-sign Sam Darnold. They're not going to make JJ McCarthy sit on the bench. They absolutely love JJ McCarthy. I think he's going to succeed in this system. He remains a great buy. Austin, we're going to close out with this question, I think. Anything you do to stay up to date on the Dynasty waiver wire? I find it harder to do with how deep the leagues are. I mean, honestly, in deeper leagues, there's just nothing on the waiver wire. Like, there's really nothing. Like, just full transparency, like, I'm in 23 Dynasty leagues on Sleeper, and some weeks I miss waivers just because I'm really busy, and it's not my top priority. If I know there's a hot name out there, I will go to my leagues and I will toggle through and see like, okay, where's this guy available? I'll put bids in. But for the most part, I'm mostly just looking at the trending names, who are people adding. And outside of that, I might toggle to who's available and look at the projections. But outside of that, like unless I have I actively have an empty roster spot I need to fill, I'm probably not just going to scroll through names and look for guys, because in the deep leagues, there's nothing down there. There's no foreseeable way to know who those players are going to be. Once you get to this part of the season, it's just picked so clean. So I try to pick up like any running back that's on a roster, rookie players that are like on taxi squads. You can pick up, backup quarterbacks. If those are ever available, I'll pick up backup quarterbacks, but even those guys are typically stashed at this point. So it's just slim pickings. You don't have to be constantly, grinding that all the time to feel like you're getting an edge. At a certain point, your edge is actually just efficient time management of your leagues, and getting kind of the most out of the least in that sense is kind of how I think about it. So I would just say, if there's a big name floating around, go check, but otherwise you're probably fine at this point. Okay, this is just an interesting question, so I'll hit this one too. How many good quarterbacks is too many to roster in a 2 quarterback plus super flex? So 3 possible starters. Never played in a league like that. I'd be very curious to know how many teams there are, because if you're in a 12-team league and you have those quarterbacks, that's kind of insane. I mean, let me think of it this way. In a regular superflex league, 1 quarterback, 1 superflex, I would not want to have more than Allen, May, and Caleb. I wouldn't want more than 3 guys that are in that type of that high of a tier. So if we're adding another slot, is it as simple as just adding 1 more and then having 1 backup? Probably. I'd say probably. I probably would want no more than 4 high-end quarterbacks, and then I would probably want to have maybe like a 5th, Winston, Russell Wilson, Matt Stafford type of guy. But I think it does depend on, first of all, how many other leagues there are, because that's going to impact the scarcity, and then also how many other starting spots you have that you have to devote roster value to. If your quarterbacks make up like 3 out of a total of 9 spots, then you can justify putting a ton of your value towards it. But if it's 3 out of like 11 spots, then I think you have to make some sacrifices there. So I think maybe a little more context needed, but in a vacuum, I'd say probably 4 top quarterbacks is the most I would want. All right, guys, I'm going to shut it down for tonight. Appreciate you guys coming and hanging out. I love that we get some active chat at this point. We have like, a good 9 or 10 people watching. That's always really fun. Appreciate the questions. They keep me thinking, keep me active, considering new scenarios and stuff. You're always more than welcome to drop ideas for topics for streams, for questions for topics to cover. It honestly just helps me out. Like it can be one of the harder things, I think, is generating more and more like perspectives to talk about. I don't like to feel like I am inundating you with the same information over and over again. And so I would love to know, what is the stuff that's on your mind? What do you want me to talk about? So that's always appreciated. Ross, I'm sorry you missed it. You can slide back to the beginning and watch it through, but I do appreciate you popping in anyway. So hope you guys have a good night. Hope you win your matchups. I am planning to go live tomorrow to answer some of the commoners' questions, the peasants. So if you dare to come down from your members throne, you can pop in for the live as well. Always love to see members in there. So, hopefully I'll see some of you then. But otherwise, just take it easy. Take care.